I remember the exact moment I realized my life was over. It wasn't in a courtroom, and it wasn't in a hospital. It was in a glass-walled office on the 42nd floor of a building I had designed, looking into the eyes of a man I would have taken a bullet for. Marcus was sitting behind the mahogany desk, swirling a glass of scotch that cost more than my first car, looking at me with this bored, detached expression. It was the look you give a waiter who brought you the wrong order, not the look you give your best friend of 15 years, your business partner, the godfather of your unborn child. He told me I was out. He told me the company, the patents, the designs, the future we built. It was all his. And the worst part wasn't the theft. It was the smile. That small, pitying smile that said he had known this was coming for years, while I was busy playing the loyal soldier. That was the moment the Elias who believed in brotherhood died, and the Elias who believed in consequences was born. We met at university in London. I was the scholarship kid from Leeds who spent his weekends in the studio library. Marcus was the golden boy from Kensington who spent his weekends charming professors and hosting parties. We shouldn't have made sense, but we did. I had the vision. He had the voice. I could draw a skyline that would change a city, but I couldn't sell a heater to an Eskimo. Marcus could sell ice to a polar bear. We bonded over cheap pizza and expensive dreams. We made a pact. We called it the blueprint. I would build the world, and he would sell it. We were going to be the kings of modern architecture, and for a decade it worked. God, it worked so well. We started Vane and Thorne out of a basement, and within 5 years, we were the hottest firm in the UK. But success acts like a magnifying glass. It shows you who people really are. The cracks started showing about 6 months ago, though I was too blind to see them. I was buried in the Apex project, a massive eco-friendly skyscraper proposed for downtown Chicago. It was going to be my masterpiece. I was pulling 18-hour days, sleeping on a cot in the office, obsessing over load-bearing walls and wind resistance. Marcus was handling the client. That's what he always said. He was flying to New York, Zurich, Dubai. I trusted him. Why wouldn't I? He was the best man at my wedding. He held my wife's hand when we lost our first pregnancy. He was family. The first red flag was the bank account. I went to pay a contractor for a specific model rendering, and the transaction was declined. I thought it was a glitch. When I asked Marcus, he laughed it off, slapping me on the back. He said he moved the funds to a high-yield holding account to maximize our interest while we waited for the Apex down payment. He made me feel stupid for even asking, telling me to stick to the drawing board and leave the finance to the big boys. I let it go. That was my first mistake. The second mistake was ignoring Sarah. Sarah was our executive assistant. She was quiet, efficient, the kind of person who keeps the world running while the egos clash. One night late, I was working on the Apex blueprints, and Sarah came in. She looked terrified. She put a file on my desk and walked out without saying a word. I opened it. It was a flight manifest. Marcus hadn't been in Dubai meeting investors. He had been in the Cayman Islands, and he hadn't gone alone. He was with the CEO of our biggest competitor, a firm called Ironclad. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I logged into our server to check the correspondence logs, but I was locked out. Admin access revoked. My heart started hammering against my ribs. I tried to call Marcus, but it went straight to voicemail. I drove to his penthouse, a penthouse paid for by the company, and the doorman told me Mr. Vane had left instructions that he wasn't to be disturbed. The next morning I walked into the office and the security guard, a man I'd greeted every morning for 4 years, wouldn't look me in the eye. He asked for my badge. I thought it was a joke. Then I saw the lawyers, 3 of them, standing in the lobby like vultures in Italian suits. They handed me a packet. It wasn't a discussion. It was an eviction. I stormed past them straight up to the office And that's when I found Marcus drinking that scotch. He didn't even stand up. He just slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a contract I had signed 3 years ago, a restructuring agreement. He told me it was for tax purposes, to protect my assets. I hadn't read the fine print. I trusted him. The clause on page 42 stated that if one partner failed to meet specific performance metrics defined solely by the majority shareholder, which Marcus had quietly become by buying out our initial angel investors without telling me, he could dissolve the partnership and retain all intellectual property. "You're burnout, Elias," Marcus said, sipping his drink. "You haven't been hitting the metrics. The Apex project is lagging. I had to make a tough call to save the company." "I designed everything," I screamed. "The Apex is mine. The patent for the wind turbine glass is mine." "Was yours," he corrected gently. "It belongs to Vane & Thorne, and Vane & Thorne belongs to me. And actually, as of this morning, the Apex design has been sold to Ironclad. We're merging. I'm the new CEO. You're a liability." I lunged at him. Security grabbed me before I could get across the desk. As they dragged me out, Marcus didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. "Don't make this messy, Elias. I'm giving you a severance package. It's generous. Take it and go teach at a community college. That's more your speed." I lost everything in 48 hours. My salary was gone. My reputation was torched. Marcus had planted stories in the industry trades that I was having a mental breakdown, that my designs were structurally unsound, that I was a risk. My phone stopped ringing. My friends in the industry ghosted me. My wife, bless her heart, stood by me, but the stress was eating us alive. We had a mortgage. We had a baby on the way. And I had a severance check that felt like hush money. I spent 2 weeks sitting in my dark living room staring at the wall. I cycled through grief, then depression, then a hot, white rage. I wanted to burn his building down. I wanted to sue him into oblivion. But I knew I couldn't win a legal battle. He had the money, the lawyers, and the contract I was stupid enough to sign. But then I remembered something. Marcus was a salesman. He knew how to sell the dream, but he didn't know how to build it. He didn't understand the math. He didn't understand the physics. He thought architecture was just pretty shapes in the sky. I stopped drinking. I stopped feeling sorry for myself. I took a shower, shaved, and called Sarah. She had been fired too, 2 days after me, for security breaches, meaning she tried to warn me. We met at a crowded diner where no one would overhear us. She was scared, but she was angry. She handed me a USB drive. "I backed up the server before they locked me out," she whispered. "Emails, financials, everything." I went home and plugged it in. I spent 3 nights combing through the data. I found the fraud immediately. Marcus had been skimming off the top for years, funneling money into shell companies to pay for his lifestyle. But that wasn't enough. If I went to the police, it would take years. He'd lawyer up, delay, and probably get a slap on the wrist while I went bankrupt. I didn't just want justice. I wanted him to feel what I felt. I wanted total, absolute dismantling. I needed to attack him where he was weakest, his ego. The Apex project was now under Ironclad's banner, with Marcus as the lead visionary. They were rushing the construction to meet a deadline for the World Architecture Expo in 6 months. It was going to be the jewel of the Chicago skyline. And because they fired me, they were building it off my preliminary blueprints, the ones that weren't finished. I knew there was a flaw in the thermal regulation system of the design. It wasn't dangerous to human life. The building wouldn't fall down. But under specific wind conditions, the glass panels I designed would create a harmonic vibration, a humming sound, a loud, unbearable, screeching hum that would permeate the entire district. I hadn't fixed it yet because I was fired before the final revision. Marcus didn't know about the hum. He only cared about the aesthetic. I could have just let it happen. But that wasn't enough. I needed to be closer. I created a fake persona. Consultant X, a freelance structural auditor operating out of Singapore. I used a voice modulator and encrypted emails. I reached out to Ironclad's board, not Marcus, but the people who owned him now. I sent them a preliminary analysis of a different project they were working on, pointing out a flaw that saved them millions. I gained their trust. Then I dropped the bait. I told them I had heard rumors about the Apex project's stability. I suggested they needed an independent audit, but it had to be secret, so they didn't spook the investors. They bit. They hired me, the man they thought was broken and gone, to audit my own stolen building remotely. Through the digital access they gave Consultant X, I watched Marcus work. I saw his emails. He was drowning. Without me to do the actual work, he was missing deadlines. He was yelling at engineers. He was cutting corners to save money and keep his bonus intact. And then I saw it. The golden opportunity. Marcus was planning a live televised unveiling of the Apex smart skin technology at the expo. He was going to demonstrate the automated window systems in front of the world's press, the mayor of Chicago, and the biggest investors in the country. He wanted to show how the building breathed. I knew the code for the smart skin. I wrote it. I spent the next 3 months planning. I worked out of a library, using a VPN, living off my wife's salary and my dwindling savings. It was humbling. It stripped away my arrogance. I realized that my bond with Marcus had been transactional for him, but emotional for me. I had to turn off my emotions. I had to become cold. 2 weeks before the expo, Marcus sent an email to the board. He was demanding a larger equity share in Ironclad, claiming the Apex was solely his genius. He was erasing me completely from the history of the project. He even gave an interview to a magazine where he said, "Some partners are dead weight. I had to cut the anchor to let the ship sail." That was the fuel I needed. The day of the expo arrived. It was a black tie affair in a massive ballroom with a live feed to the construction site where the prototype panels were installed. Marcus was on stage, wearing a tuxedo, looking like a god. He was charming the crowd, making jokes, talking about vision and bravery. I was there too. I had bought a ticket as a general attendee. I stood in the back, in the shadows, wearing a baseball cap and a plain suit. I watched him soak up the applause that belonged to me. He signaled for the demonstration. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed, "I give you the future of living." He pressed the button on the oversized tablet to activate the smart skin. At that moment, I executed the command on my phone. I hadn't just left the flaw in the thermal system. I had embedded a dormant override in the central control system months ago, back when I still had access, hidden inside a texture file for the lobby rendering. A Trojan horse that only activated when specific parameters were met, like a master system reboot. On the giant screen behind Marcus, the live feed showed the building. The windows were supposed to open gracefully, like a flower blooming. Instead, they began to open and close rapidly, violently. Slam, open, slam, open. It looked like the building was having a seizure. And then came the sound, the harmonic vibration. Even through the live feed speakers, it was a terrible, grinding screech. The crowd in the ballroom gasped. Marcus tapped the tablet frantically. "A minor technical glitch," he stammered. "Just a moment." Then, the second phase of my code executed. The giant screen behind him, which was supposed to show the company logo, flickered. It turned black. Then, text appeared. Not code, not blueprints, emails. Massive, high-definition screenshots of Marcus's private emails. The email to the Cayman Islands Bank setting up the laundering account. The email to Ironclad offering to steal the designs while I was still his partner. The email where he called the mayor of Chicago a useful idiot who could be bought. And finally, the email to the safety inspectors, bribing them to overlook the fire rating on the materials he substituted to save money. The room went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Marcus turned around, saw the screen, and his face went the color of ash. He looked small. He looked like a terrified child. He screamed at the technicians to cut the feed, but I had locked the system. For 3 agonizing minutes, the world read Marcus Vane's diary of corruption. I watched from the back. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I just felt a heavy weight lift off my chest. Then the police sirens started. Not at the building, here, at the expo. Sarah had sent the unredacted financial files to the FBI and the Securities and Exchange Commission that morning. The timing was impeccable. As the agents walked onto the stage, Marcus tried to run. He actually tried to bolt toward the backstage exit, but he tripped over a cable for the very presentation he was using to lie to the world. He fell hard. When he looked up, the cameras were flashing. The image of him on his knees, disheveled and panicked, was the front page of every newspaper the next day. I walked out of the ballroom before the handcuffs went on. I walked out into the cool night air of the city. I called my wife. "It's done," I said. The fallout was nuclear. Ironclad stock plummeted. The Apex project was halted and investigated. Marcus was charged with corporate fraud, embezzlement, and bribery. Because of the safety violations I exposed, he was looking at serious prison time, not just fines. But the sweetest victory wasn't seeing him in an orange jumpsuit on the news 6 months later. It was what happened to me. Ironclad, desperate to salvage the project and their reputation, reached out to the only person who knew the building inside and out. They didn't know I was Consultant X, but they knew I was the original architect. They begged me to come back as an independent contractor to fix the mess. I walked into the same office where Marcus had fired me. I sat at the same mahogany desk. The new CEO of Ironclad sat where I used to sit. "We need you, Elias," he said. "Name your price." I looked at the view. I looked at the city I loved. "Triple my original fee," I said calmly. "Full creative control, and the building gets renamed." "Done," he said without hesitation. "What do you want to call it?" I thought about the betrayal. I thought about the lessons learned. I learned that blind trust is a weakness, but calculated trust is a weapon. I learned that talent without protection is just a gift for thieves. And I learned that the best revenge isn't hurting someone, it's outliving their influence. "Call it the Phoenix," I said. I signed the contract. I visited Marcus once in prison about a year later. I didn't have to, but I needed closure. He looked 10 years older. The charm was gone. He tried to play the victim, blaming the system, blaming me for setting him up. "I didn't set you up, Marcus," I told him, speaking through the glass partition. "I just turned on the lights. You were the one standing in the dark." I stood up to leave. "Elias, wait," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "We were brothers. Doesn't that mean anything?" I looked at him, and for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. "It meant everything to me," I said. "That's why it had to end this way." I walked out of the prison and didn't look back. I had a building to finish, and this time my name was going to be carved in stone, not written in sand.